So this is part 2 of how I start the school year. If you haven't checked out part 1, then I highly recommend you pause this one, go down to the description and click on the link to watch part 1, where I share my first classroom mantra with students, which is never tell an answer, that I stole from Fawn Win. In this video, I'm going to share with you my second classroom mantra, which is embrace the info gap. And I'll show you how I give students opportunities to practice this. So once we do that, we wrap that up, I move on to my next icebreaker, which is estimating my height. Now, so even though I teach secondary math, I still am taller than most students. And so naturally, students are still asking me, hey, how tall are you? So I still use this as an icebreaker, as a warm-up. And again, what's my goal is to create a low risk and a high trust environment, and also share my 2 classroom mantras. One is never tell an answer, and the second one you're going to find out soon. So as I'm working the classroom, I walk around as students are talking at their tables, estimating my height. They might ask questions. At least one student per class will always want to stand next to me. I also ask students if they know their heights, because they're going to need to know their heights for certain activities we do. And I tell them it's okay if you don't know your height. We'll figure it out. We'll measure your height. So when I bring this activity back together, I tell students the importance of this activity. And the mistake I made, because when I taught middle school, specifically 6th and 7th grade, students would naturally ask me, how tall are you, Mr. Stadel? And I would answer them immediately. And I made the mistake of telling them the answer to my height. And I'll share that in a future video. But essentially what I did was I did not create an info gap. So this is my opportunity where I share this story with students about embracing the info gap. I learned that when students asked me how tall I was, I would ask them, well, how tall do you think I am? And by me flipping that script on them, they all of a sudden started being more curious and creative, and it boosted their critical thinking in terms of how they were thinking about my height compared to a classmate's height or something else in the room or whatever. And so I tell my students on day 1, this is our second classroom mantra, is to embrace the info gap. Info gaps boost your curiosity, creativity, and critical thinking. And I firmly believe in this. I really do. We can squash curiosity, creativity, and critical thinking if we're too quick to give answers to questions. We can delay those answers. And in that delay, what we're going to do is create some info gaps, which boost curiosity, creativity, and critical thinking. So after I've shared my 2 classroom mantras with students, I tell them, we will have plenty of opportunities to practice these, especially today on day 1. For example, with my height, I'm going to have future classes coming in, and I'm going to ask them to estimate my height as well. So I'm going to ask you to never tell an answer, and that is really important. So I thank them in advance for doing that. After we wrap up the activity where we estimate my height, I introduce students to what is called the thinking classroom. And I tell them this is where we're going to develop your life and math skills of problem solving, critical thinking, collaboration, and communication. And I tell them, I can tell you here on day 1, that's what we're going to be doing a lot of, but over time I need to gain their trust, and they need to see what that looks like. All right, so I'm going to share with you where Thinking Classrooms comes from. It comes from Peter Liljedahl's great book called Building Thinking Classrooms in Mathematics. It's a game changer, and I highly recommend it. So with this book, you're going to find 14 practices that help engage students. And I've been using a lot of methods from this book, not all of them, but I've been using a lot of them for the past few years. And it's important that students learn quickly what a thinking classroom can look like, because they might not be used to it. So I highly recommend you check out that book if you haven't already. I'll leave a link down below. So I'm sharing this book with you because a lot of thinking classrooms revolve around problem solving. And we need to have problem solving tasks that encourage students to think and collaborate. So what I do is I just say, here's the definition of problem solving. I'm taking it from Peter's book. It's what we do when we don't know what to do. We've all been in those situations when we're faced with a problem and we might be unsure on how to proceed. I tell them that the answer is not obvious, similar to the puzzles that they saw when they walked in the door. The answers were not obvious, and that's what problem solving is. Also, problem-solving tasks will oftentimes have multiple solutions. With the toothpick tasks that they saw when they walked in that day, there's probably not multiple solutions. They had multiple ideas, but they weren't necessarily solutions that fit the criteria. I tell my students that I'm going to give them problem-solving tasks that oftentimes have multiple solutions. So once I give a quick intro on what problem-solving is and problem-solving tasks in the thinking classroom, I grab 21 cards and I show them a card trick. And it's one that Peter lays out in his book, and you can go to his website. And I tell them this is another opportunity for them to embrace the info gap and never tell an answer. In a future video, I will share how I facilitate this task. So usually this task takes about 30 minutes for students to understand the task, get working at their whiteboards. We take a little break where I do the card trick a second time where they can ask more questions. And these are all opportunities for them to practice to never tell an answer in case a group gets it before other groups, and opportunities for them to embrace the info gap. So before we wrap up class, I remind the students of the 2 classroom mantras: embrace the info gap and never tell an answer. I remind them that I'm going to have more classes coming in that day, and I want them to have the same opportunities to be curious, be creative, and exercise their critical thinking. To me, that's what builds a low risk and high trust environment. Now, some of you might be thinking, gosh, Andrew, did students leave that day and not find out the answers to the puzzles or the card trick? And my short answer is yes, and that's okay, because that oftentimes might happen in math class. They might have left with a headache, not knowing the answer to something, and that's okay. The good news I have is that the next time I see them, we will provide some relief to that headache. So what I'll do is on the next time I see students, I'll have a student share the solution to this toothpick problem if a group of students came up with it, and chances are really good. Same thing here. If students don't come up with a solution to the 7 minus 0 equals 6, that's okay. I'll share that with them because I want those students to have that relief. And I want them to know that it's so powerful for them to hear from their classmates how to figure out a problem instead of me. But I also want to provide relief to those students that are like, oh, just tell me how to do this problem. And I will after some time that we've had to productively struggle with the task. So in wrapping up this video, there's 2 books I highly recommend you check out. I'll leave links below for you to check those out. However you start your school year, I encourage you to create a low risk and a high trust environment. And the most important thing I think we can do on day 1 is learn our students' names and how to say them. Because like Dale Carnegie said, it's pretty much the sweetest sound to your ears. I hope this framework and these tools and these puzzles and everything I shared in this video was helpful. Take care.